Hello, everybody, and welcome to Commodity Culture, where our goal is to make you a better investor in the commodity sector. My name is Jesse Day. Before we dive in, standard disclaimer, nothing here is investment advice. Do your own due diligence. And today's guest is the Vice President and General Manager of First Mint, a unique silver bullion retailer that mints their own silver coins and bars from First Majestic Silver's production. We're going to dive into the silver market as well as discuss First Mint. It's Cory Anderson. Great to have you on the show.
Hey, likewise, Jesse. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here. Love your product. So happy for this opportunity.
Well, thank you so much. I want to start, obviously, some pretty big headlines coming out today as we're recording on Friday, June 13th. And that is, of course, Israel launching several strikes at Iran, assassinating military leaders, nuclear scientists. Very big day. We're seeing an escalation of global conflict in a lot of different areas around the world. You know, the Russia-Ukraine conflict. There's talk of a U.S.-China hot war potentially emerging at some point in the future. I wonder what your thoughts are in terms of this, potential for increased conflict driving safe haven demand for precious metals.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting time for us to have an interview after what occurred yesterday, right? We've already had a lot of conflicts popping up around the world the past few years, and we're seeing a lot of safe haven movement into metals. Yesterday was no different, but it adds to everything else going on. When that does occur, I look at our website's revenues and order volume, and we're starting to see volume pick up and average order value pick up. And so that is interesting right off the bat to see that and see how the headlines directly contribute to sales of precious metals.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to also touch on kind of the bigger picture when it comes to both gold and silver and ask you what you see as the main themes and trends that you think more investors and stackers should be paying attention to when it comes to gold and silver markets.
Absolutely. I look at the silver to gold ratio. I look at central bank buying, and I look at the US dollar index. Starting off with the silver to gold ratio, traditionally since 1971, it's been 65 to 1. So 65 ounces of silver to 1 ounce of gold, which is still high considering, up against the course of human history. But as of late, we've seen gold trend up to 103. The gold to silver ratio trend up to 103 to 1. It's ticked back down to 94 to 1. So you're seeing gold actually drag silver up finally, and that ratio correct a little bit. But unprecedentedly high silver to gold ratio usually means good things for silver eventually. It's always a little bit slower to catch on. And then I look at central bank buying. Central banks have been quietly buying gold for the last 15 years. And prior to that, they were net sellers. So while they're talking about AI and tech and all these other stocks you should invest in and crypto, they're quietly buying gold. So there's a little bit of look over here going on while we stockpile gold. And now we're starting to see people are catching on to that, and they're buying gold themselves too. So I love to watch that. The central banks have bought gold more rapidly in 2022 to today. They haven't bought gold that aggressively since the 60s. So that's an interesting trend to watch. And then I also look at the US dollar index, which hit a 3-year low yesterday, which usually means good things for gold and silver and for miners of gold and silver, like our parent company, First Majestic.
I want to touch on the possibility of gold being reintroduced to the monetary system. Then I want to move on to silver, because obviously very exciting times in that space at present. We've heard talks of a BRICS gold-backed currency. Now we're hearing about potentially gold-backed bonds being issued by the U.S. government, the possibility of a revaluation of gold on the Fed's balance sheet, which could, of course, have big implications. How could these events potentially reshape gold's role in our monetary system if they do come to pass? And how do you view gold and silver as well potentially playing a role up ahead in the monetary system?
Sure. Well, let me caveat this with I'm not an economist, but I do follow this BRICS development closely. BRICS nations have been the most significant buyers of gold as of late. That's Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, for those that don't know. They're diversifying their reserves with gold. They're reducing their reliance on the dollar by acquiring gold. We call that de-dollarization. That's a big deal. And the U.S. better follow suit if they want to remain relevant in what looks like the future global monetary system.
And the gold in Fort Knox, that this has been another point of contention recently. Is it there? Is it not? Trump making some interesting comments when he had Macron in the Oval Office that maybe somebody stole it. And we saw a lot of push for an audit. You know, Ron Paul wants to get in there and audit it. I think Elon Musk was talking about it at some point. But it's been crickets. We have not seen an audit take place. Do you think that the gold reserves that the U.S. has stated are actually there?
Man, that's such a great question. Of course, as an American, I served in our military. I love our Constitution. I want to believe it's there, but when there's no audits coming to fruition, it begs the question, doesn't it? I know that different states are setting up their own Fort Knox-like facilities. You have them in Texas. I think Florida's building one. You have them in Idaho. I'm sure Wyoming's working on one. So why, right? A lot of states are looking at where their gold and silver reserves are at, and they want to bring them home. Why is it such a big deal to audit Fort Knox? It's another government facility. We should have direct access to that. We know what the Chinese gold reserves are. We know what the Russian gold reserves are. The U.S. is hesitant to publish ours. Why? So, it does make me question at this point whether that gold is actually there or not.
It is exciting times for silver. We've breached and are remaining above $36, at least at the time of this recording. I've spoken to several technical analysts who stated that if silver can get above and stay above $35, we could see significant upside from there. Adjusted for inflation, a return to all-time highs would mean triple-digit silver at this point. What are your thoughts, and what would it take for us to get back to those previous all-time highs?
Yeah, we love that triple-digit silver moniker at First Majestic / First Mint. Going back to the silver to gold ratio, we're looking at the all-time highs for gold, trading at 34.50 today, right? 3,400 yesterday. So big, rapid moves. And then that dragged silver up to 36 and 37. Silver has now traded over $30 for the longest time period in its history. And it's not that's not a really long period. It's only been since September of last year. But there's no other period where it's actually stayed this steady above $30. So that in and of itself is interesting. We tested 35 last year. We saw it kind of settle back down at 32 and even hit 31. And then, we kind of looked at 32.50 as a resistance level and then 35 as a resistance level. We woke up one day last week and blew right through that. So it's just kind of fascinating what's going on. I think that is just gold pulling up silver right now because, like I said, that gold to silver ratio is reaching unprecedented levels. So as gold climbs this high, it's going to pull silver up with it. I think once mainstream retail investors really understand the structural silver deficit that the world's facing, the miners aren't keeping up, I think we're going to blow past $50 and watch out because between 40 and 50, more and more people are going to get on board, and it's going to capture silver is going to capture as many headlines as gold. And at that point, we're headed for triple digits.
I tend to agree with you on that call. And speaking of the supply deficit, the Silver Institute, as well as several guests on this show, have stated that we are now in the fourth year of a silver supply deficit. Obviously, a lot of industrial demand for silver. And perhaps the future driver of more retail buying in the West, as you alluded to, once it gets between that $40 and $50 range. When do you think the supply-demand imbalance will really get reflected in the price? When will the market really wake up to that, in your view?
Well, it's interesting. I have a very close view on this, being a part of a mining company, and that was part of my allure in joining First Majestic and building out First Mint, was because it's the first company of its kind to really get into minting and having the reserves of metal behind them. So the 200 to 300 million ounces per year deficit is real, and it's been real for 4+ years. I think we globally mine about 1.1 billion ounces, and we're right around 800 million ounces of supply. That in and of itself doesn't sound like a lot, but times 5 years, you're at a billion ounce deficit. So, and then the other thing that you have to talk about in a situation like this and is technology, right? And we hear a lot about solar. We hear a lot about EVs. What I'm starting to look at is actually crypto and the demands placed on that. It demands a ton of power, a ton of storage. AI is right there with it. Power and storage and circuitry, and the circuit boards require silver. And then the other unknown is the military. Now, I have the distinct advantage of having fulfilled some silver shipments to DoD facilities, and so that's a big unknown. But those were not small orders, and I'll just leave it at that. But industry is soaking up or absorbing 60% of our silver supply. Retail investors are soaking up about 20%, and then jewelry, hardware, flatwares, soaking up with the other 20%. So I think as we see silver tick up above 38 and 40, you're going to see more retail investors come in. And then that 20% of the silver supply that's going toward retail is going to increase to 25, 30, 40%. That's going to create the perfect storm for triple digit silver. Because really the stocks aren't there, and our mining company will tell you, we don't have to sell it through a mint. The demand from industry can absorb every ounce of production if need be. But I say our future is technology, right? We are demanding more and more technology, and we're quietly demanding more and more silver with every piece of technology we put out. And I won't list them all. That would take up the whole interview. But silver is in everything. So that's something to think about. And then the other thing to think about is a third of our world doesn't have electricity. What happens when we electrify that other third of our world? That's more silver. And we're not finding more silver. And while I'm on the topic, the other thing that people love to say, the contrarians love to say, well, the miners will just produce more. That's not true. The miners are producing all they can with silver at 36 and gold at 34.50. The mines aren't easy to set up. It takes 10, 15, 20 years to bring a mine online from start to finish. And that's just to get it into production. I think 15 years is actually conservative. And I've just learned that as being a part of First Majestic. And then you have permitting issues that might crop up along the way. So, it's not a spigot. The miners don't get to just pull more out of the earth. We have world-class geologists scouring our existing mine sites for new veins. And, it's harder and harder to find. And luckily they're world-class, and they keep making new discoveries and supplying our mint. It's not short of some meteorite full of gold and silver gently landing on the Earth's surface. We don't get to just turn on production that easily.
Great summary there. And I think this is a perfect opportunity to dive into First Mint. Could you start by giving us an overview of the company and what separates you from other precious metals retailers?
Yeah, absolutely. So it was 2008. Our vice president of marketing, Jill Arias, at the time had this awesome idea to sell bullion to our shareholders, people that believe in natural resource investing. Hey, they probably want some physical silver from the mines they invest in. So they started sending raw material to mints to create retail ready product. And that business was always a bit of a hobby farm for the company. It was a nice little feature on the First Majestic homepage, was the Bullion store. Fast forward to 2021, and First Majestic was sending silver around to all these mints. I was at one of them before they recruited me. And we were not getting their finished product to them in a timely manner. It was 3 months. It was 6 months. And if you remember back in 2021, we had a little thing called the silver squeeze, where competitors were turning off their websites on, I think it was January. It was somewhere in late January in 2021. They knew that they didn't have the stockpiles to sell. So once they figured out that they were pretty much sold out, they turned off their website and stopped allowing orders to come in. First Majestic was right there along with that. And that continued into 2022, early 2023, until we really had kind of a slowdown. But it was in that 2022 year and 2023 where our CEO, Keith Neumeyer, said, hey, enough's enough of not controlling our supply chain and delaying our demand and not meeting demand. So he said, let's build our own mint. And he started to cherry pick a few industry veterans. And we started building the mint in early 2023, started selling metal. It took a long time. We're in Las Vegas, so we had Clark County permitting to navigate. We're very stringent safety requirements here because of the strip and the casinos and the number of people in those buildings. So safety's huge here. It took us a while to get everything online. And then luckily I had already helped build a new facility at my previous employer. So that I think I like to think I was a breath of fresh air for First Majestic when I said I would join them in this endeavor. But two Marches ago, we started selling silver. And last year, we sold 5% of all silver production from First Majestic through the mint to the retail market. And in Q1 of this year, we sold 7% of that to the retail market. So things are picking up. People are starting to buy in. It's always been a shareholder service. So we want to mint silver for our shareholders. But we're starting to see more and more people hear about us, more and more people visit our website. And then we also have this really fun thing about our capacity and being boutique and not having to hedge our metal because the mine feeds us. We take a lot of custom orders. So we're doing 2 to 3 custom orders a month. And those are for other mining companies that want employee recognition awards. Those are for charities that want stuff for their galas to auction off and raise money for charities. That's a lot of fun for the team out back on the factory floor. And then we have some artist and entertainment stuff coming up that's exciting. So we don't flood the market with new products. We try to be fairly steady state. Our business model isn't to launch a new product every week and keep people coming back. It's to be your steady state supplier that is direct from the mine. And so I like to say mine to mint or fresh from the mountain silver.
That's awesome. Now, if somebody's coming to you, a stacker is coming to you, and they want to get the most value for their money when they're looking to buy physical silver bullion, what kind of products would you point them to?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I like them all, Jesse. All right, I'll try not to be biased here from the perspective of a mint director. Let's see. There is nothing like the first time you hand somebody a large format silver bar. I love to hand people a kilo. We give a tour. The board came down here last December, did a tour, did their board meeting. But when the first time people step into the vault and you hand them a silver kilo and their eyes light up and there's almost something primal about it. So I love to say the large format bars. That's also your best bang for your buck. But personally, I actually buy 1 ounce rounds because that's just kind of my jam. I love the artwork that we can achieve on them. The designs are stellar. We can all relate to having coins rattling around in our pocket, even though that's, times are changing. Maybe I'm a bit of a weirdo, but I like to think that if the dollar, something devastating happens to the dollar, that I'm going to go buy some bread with my 1 ounce rounds if I need to. And, worst case scenario thinker. I always hope for the best and plan for the worst, right?
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. It's obviously up to what the person is looking for, because best bang for your buck, obviously kilo bar, but in a Mad Max scenario, when maybe the electricity grid does go down, we do see a governmental collapse, something serious happening, to have the smaller rounds on hand to potentially barter with your neighbors or be able to potentially buy food with it, I think is a good kind of doomsday prepper approach to it, and makes a lot of sense to me personally. I wonder, when looking at silver as both an investment and as a way to preserve wealth, how do you look at it? Would you say that silver bullion is more of a wealth preservation asset, whereas a silver miner like First Majestic equity is more of a capital appreciation asset? Is that how you would look at it?
Yeah, I think you're spot on. I look at silver as a buy it and hold it. I've made some fortunate trades just being in the industry and having the daily look at the price movements. So obviously, it's why you have me on the show. It's because this is what I eat, sleep, and breathe every day. Um, I've bought silver at $12. I've bought silver at 18. I bought it at 24. Bought silver at 32. But I've also, I did sell a little bit here and there just for fun. I've also sold my own personal silver to friends at spot at $30 because I want to get them in the game, and they're loving life right now. They're going, oh man, cool. Glad I bought that silver at $30, 2 months ago or whatever it was. But I also don't sell most of my silver. I sit on it. When I buy it, it's an investment that I want to sit on for a long time, maybe forever, because it's just something that I want to give to the kids one day and their kids one day. And so there's heirloom pieces that I buy, but I buy a lot of bars and rounds just from us because I'm proud of our products and proud of our team. But I buy the silver for a long-term investment, helps me sleep at night. And then on the stock side of First Majestic, that's a lot. Well, silver's been extremely volatile, but our stock has been very interesting too, and I do buy that as well. But I buy that more for, I guess, short-term capital changes and improvements. Really, I mean, it's gone up 40% this quarter. So those are dramatic swings and minors that we all tend to like, unless we're bag holders. But that's what's exciting about the commodity space in general, right? So I love my First Majestic stock, and I love the physical silver too. So, and that's part of the reason we set up the mint too, was shareholders have a standing discount on the website.
Yeah, break that down for us.
So that's always been the case. It's always been a shareholder a perk, and so if you have 100 shares or more of First Majestic stock, you go onto firstmint.com, and at the top right, you click on shareholders, and you create your account and submit that account to us or submit your proof of share ownership to our customer service team, and then they send you your permanent promo code for being a shareholder. So that's right now it's 50 cents an ounce, but we're looking at some other things in the future that make that even greater, and possibly some tier structure, so that if you're 1,000 shares possibly gets a better discount on 100 or 1,000 ounces. So we're talking through some fun things there, but shareholders really appreciate that. And why not buy your silver from the company you hold shares in, right?
Yeah.
So it's a lot of fun.
That's very fascinating. Is there anything we haven't yet covered, or anything you want to emphasize to potential customers about First Mint or the silver markets, and anything that's on your mind?
Oh, a couple things. Well, you mentioned like the power outage, the prepper thing earlier, and we saw that in Spain or pretty recently. People freaked out because they lost power, and it wasn't a permanent long-term blackout, but we all define long-term differently. But listen, I've had times where my banking app is down, and we all bank electronically. Cash is, people look at me funny when I pay with greenbacks, and they don't know how to count sometimes to give me my change, which is, it's a brave new world, right? But I like to think that, hey, I can't access my accounts on my phone, or I can't swipe my card. Yeah, I have cash on hand too, but if in a scenario like that, people freaked out in 6 hours, what are they going to do if it's a week? And that's when, we've seen this in war zones too, right? Like, I had a great grandfather in Korea who actually talked about shaving off gold bars to go buy groceries, to go buy their bread and soup. So those things are real, and with our, the risks that exist to our electrical grid, our heavy reliance on technology. I don't like to think that it would ever go away, but I think that we could see dramatic pauses in power supply, and it's something that we take for granted. And at that point, you go, hey, maybe I buy some groceries, or I buy some gas with the ounce of silver out of my safe. hopefully, but that by that point, silver's very expensive, and I can afford a week's worth of groceries with that 1 ounce. But then again, things aren't going very well for the country, so you're always in this juxtaposition with precious metals because you love precious metals, but if they're shooting too high too fast, what's going on in the world, right? Just like the events that unfolded yesterday. So that's what I look at. But in terms of the mint and this company, really, it was a fantastic opportunity I couldn't pass up because it's the only company in the world that is a mining company in the world that has opened up a mint and vertically integrated that aspect of the business and decided to challenge the paper derivative market by moving more ounces to retail consumers. And so, we did 5% of the silver to the retail market last year, 10% is our goal. But hey, if that retail market really heats up, who's to say that all 15 million ounces that First Majestic might produce this year don't flow to the retail market? So we've seen those demand spikes before in very recent history. I'd love to see that again. And I would just encourage people to consider, get yourself some exposure to the stock and then enjoy a discount on your bullion. If you're a regular bullion buyer, it makes good sense. So we run a lot of promotions and we've got some cool products dropping this year. In fact, a couple in the very near future. And, people are enjoying that.
Well, I will put a link in the description below to First Mint for people who want to check it out. Cory, this has been a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks so much for having me, Jesse.
Commodity Culture is a series on commodities and natural resources. If you would like to see more, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification so you're always up to date with the latest episodes.